Hi, I'm Elle, and it's lovely to see all of you back here for another art video. And before I show you all how I used the 3D posing app to make art, I just want to say thank you to everybody that helped me find a name for the character that I drew in my previous video. I've settled on a name for her. I've decided to call her Ravina. It's a name from India that means sunshine, and I thought it was just a really beautiful name that captured her personality really well. And I apologise in advance if you can hear rain and wind in the background. The weather's just doing its thing today. There's not much that I can do about that, unfortunately. But without further ado, I can start the video, so here we go. Because I knew that I was going to be using a 3D posing app to help me later on, I didn't need to put a lot of detail into my thumbnail sketches. I just wanted to put down the basic pose that I had in mind, and I tried a little bit of a background in there, but that's something that I'm going to tackle in the video after this one. And that'll be up next week, so if you want to know exactly when that drops, don't forget to subscribe and ring the little bell icon. It'll notify you every time I upload a new video. So the app that I decided to use to make the pose in is a mobile app called Magic Poser. You can get it on Apple and Android, and it's really basic to use. So to pose the model, you just click on the body part that you'd like to move, and it'll give you some options for how you can rotate each body part. You just put your finger on the wheel and scroll it around and move it into the position that you would like. It's always better to come into the app when you have a clear idea of the pose you want to make, because it can be kind of finicky to pose them sometimes. I've used it 3 or 4 times in the past, and each time you use it you do get faster, but yeah, just make sure you know what you want out of it. Otherwise you'll just be in there for hours getting nowhere. So when you have a pose that you like, you just click the little icon in the top left and it'll give you this drop down menu. I don't have the paid version, so I can only export as 2D. I get rid of the sky and the ground, and I keep transparent background on and put it to high resolution, and then click export. And the reason that I keep the transparent background clicked on is because when you import it into a drawing app of your choice, for me it's Procreate, you can just draw behind the model. You don't have to worry about cutting it out and deleting the background. And then I just drag it on top of my thumbnail sketch and size it to how I want it. I decided to go for a landscape orientation instead of a portrait one for this. I want to practice my landscapes, so I felt like this was going to be a good opportunity because I was going to save some time drawing the character. And I still decided to draw my construction lines over the top, maybe out of habit, but I also wanted to draw a woman, so the fact that the base model in the free version of the app is a male model, I needed it to be able to match the physique of the character that I had in mind, so just drawing over the top of it anyway, even though you have kind of an outline to sketch around, it helped make those changes. You can get a female model if you pay for the app, but it doesn't really take me all that long to make the changes that I need. So if you can't afford the paid version of the app, I think that's perfectly fine. You don't really need to buy all of the features to get something out of it. And that way you're still forced to kind of learn anatomy so you can make those changes. If you become way too reliant on 3D posing apps, you're not going to be able to draw poses from imagination, or you're not going to be able to change the pose on the fly. 3D posing apps are great if you want to speed up the process, but the unfortunate thing is they're not going to teach you anatomy, they're not going to teach you how to be more creative with the poses that you're drawing. The main reason that I've used them a couple of times in the past is simply because I'm very slow at drawing and painting, and they speed things up. The algorithm is quite annoyed at me a lot of the times because I'm not posting fast enough. So now that the sketch is complete, I still like to go in and manually block in the silhouette. You can do this with the lasso tool as well, but the edges end up kind of looking a little bit janky. I also kind of don't like using the lasso tool when I have to cut out a whole bunch of internal parts, like the blank space between the arm and the leg. It gets a little bit annoying, so I just prefer to manually paint it in if the pose is a little bit more complex. So then I bring back the 3D model and I'll start painting in where the light source is coming from. Because it is a 3D model, the app actually has its own lighting engine in there, and you can change like the direction of the light and get something that you want, but it can be kind of tricky if you want to change that later, so I suggest really thinking about it before you decide to export your image. All I'm doing now is just changing the color temperature of the piece to try and make it look a little bit fleshier. Because the 3D model is blue, and unless you want to draw blue people, you're going to have to find a way to change the skin tone to something that you would prefer. And you're going to have to find a way that you can do that yourself. I like to use a combination of changing the color temperature and painting manually over the top, but there are a couple of different methods you could use. You could use the curves function and change the different color channels within there, or you could probably use a layer blending mode such as overlay or soft light. I decided to change the background color too. I felt like it would bring out the warmer tones in the skin color if I did that. I ended up changing it to a lighter bluer color again later, but it doesn't really matter. Then I decided to merge a lot of things down into one layer. I tend to do this quite frequently because I like to just paint on over the top of everything. I do this at the stage where the sketch layer is starting to really annoy me, because if I turn it off I lose a lot of the detail, but if I just paint on over the top of it, then I get to keep that detail but get rid of the ugliness and the messiness of the sketch. So then I just started manually painting over and over and over again to kind of try and brighten up the skin a lot more. I still found it kind of washed out from the 3D model underneath. Just because the 3D model makes other parts of the process a lot quicker doesn't mean that it makes the colouring process quicker. It kind of creates its own problems that you have to solve along the way. So then I decided to make some changes to the clothing. Big surprise there, I always end up making changes at some stage. Because I don't do line art, it's not too much of a problem. I like to keep things kind of fluid and organic, and making changes along the way is kind of always a good thing because it means that you've had a better idea than the one that you had before. And being able to do that successfully is about knowing when to show restraint, and that's just something that comes with practice, so keep painting and keep making art and you'll get better at it with time. And the rest of this is just rendering and polishing things, and after another 2 hours I was finished. And here they are side by side, and you can see some of the changes that I made along the way. I also made changes to how strong the lighting and the shadows were. That's mainly because I'm going to do a background later, and the background's going to determine a couple of things. So the lighting and the shadows and all of that, they're probably going to change, but we'll see what happens. So what are the pros and cons of using a 3D posing app? Well, one of the biggest pros is that it saves a lot of time. So it took me about 5 hours to paint this, whereas usually it would probably have taken me around 7 or 8 hours. And I haven't even done a background yet. One of the other pros is that it really helps with perspective. If you wanted to change the camera angle to be looking down at the character or looking up at the character, it's really easy to do that. It would take like a couple of seconds to change that. Whereas if you're a beginner artist, perspective is such a hard thing to get correct. So yeah, using a posing app is definitely going to help you there. It also helps with getting lighting correct. As I said before, the lighting was already positioned in a way that I wanted it to be, because as you move the model around on the page, the inbuilt lighting engine will just render all of that for you. And the last pro that I'm going to touch on is the fact that you can make custom poses. If you can't find a photo reference of the pose that you want to draw, then being able to use these apps is a really big help. Now on to the cons. You can definitely become reliant on these apps, and all of the pros that I mentioned before are things that you should really be studying and practicing on your own, and you should be making mistakes with those things as well. That's how you really learn. But if you're using a posing app, it gets everything correct for you basically, and you're not going to learn through making those mistakes that you would normally be making without it. It can sometimes also lack the ability to do foreshortening. So if you want to draw a character with their arm or their leg or something coming at you, it might not be able to do that. A lot of these apps have that feature hidden behind a paywall, and when you muck around with it, it's not even really that good at doing it. I know that Clip Studio Paint has a really good 3D modeling engine, and the foreshortening capabilities in that are really good, but not everybody can afford a subscription to that. Also, as you saw, I had to manually paint the colours on top of the 3D model. Some modelling programs will allow you to change the colour of the skin, or you can even get some pretty high detailed models to put into Blender that already have all the skin colour and texture on that you could ever want, but The app that I use doesn't have that, or at least it doesn't have it in the free version, so that is another con that you have to be aware of. Also, the poses that you make in these apps can kind of look a little bit stiff and unnatural, so if you're a beginner artist you might have a hard time drawing over it in a way that looks a little bit more human and organic. Thank you for sticking around to the end on this one, especially seeing as I didn't do a background. But that'll be coming up next week, and I will be trying to draw like another artist that I really admire. This person is mostly known for how they draw characters and the style that they have, but I think that their backgrounds are really good, and I don't hear anybody ever talking about it, so I thought I'd do a video on it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, bye!